We're back. We're live. It's been a very interesting, really provocative and interesting week at ThinkTech. And today we have a couple of shows, more than a couple. We like, 3 or 4 of them today. Beginning with a visit with Alan Ma, attorney at law in the Alan Ma Law Office. And he has, he's been here doing, kinds of, what do you call it? Law with Asia, so that's what this is, an Asia in Review program, and he's taught immigration law for many years at the law school, William S. Richardson Law School, and he's been a China hand, a China scholar, if you will, trying to find out what's going on in China. What did I miss, Alan?
No, you. I think that you praised me too much and calling me a China hand. Although I know a bit about it because I go to China no less than, and 3-4 times a year. And my work does deal with a lot of Chinese, particularly recently, and there is an influx of Chinese coming to Hawaii. So I do know a little bit more about dealing with the Chinese and the Chinese current economic system.
Okay, well, so it's not so much a China hand, it's a person who is dealing with bringing the Chinese here, giving them legal opportunities, giving them investment opportunities, giving them immigration opportunities.
Yeah, a bulk of my work deals with those.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Well, I think China is really a big and continuing story. And with you, we would like to study the China model and how it is conceived, how it is in fact, how it is changing, how those changes are going to affect China, the world, and Hawaii. But let's talk first about something that came out in the press maybe 3 weeks ago. And you and I went out to dinner with the Chinese Law Exchange lawyers, who are embedded in the Cage Schutte firm, Thomas Wang and Jane Ying, I think it is. And they were very interesting. And one of the things we were talking about was this special free trade zone that the China government has, created in Shanghai. Now, this is supposed to be a kind of an adventure by the Chinese government to try to reduplicate the free trade, phenomenon in Hong Kong, which is actually a very important phenomenon for China. So you wonder about why they're doing this and what does this mean for the future of Hong Kong. And what does this mean for the future of Shanghai? And will the trade zone work? Or is it just an experiment that may or may not work? So first, let's talk about Hong Kong. What does Hong Kong mean to China?
Okay. Historically, and particularly after 1949, and a lot of foreign countries wanted to do business in China, and they did not understand China, and the bureaucracy stopped a lot of foreign organization businesses to get into China. Hong Kong became very important at and right at the doorstep of China, and Hong Kong has a lot of well-trained professionals. It took a major lead to help a lot of foreign organizations to get into China. So it became a very vital, I would say, place, and for any foreign entities to get into China to do business and so forth. Mm-hmm.
So at the height of it, say, just before the reversion to China, it was really going great guns, wasn't it?
Right.
Lots of international companies there, lots of business, enormous energy as few places in the world, with noise and commotion and business in every form. And the tax structure was very easy on people. So people, companies came from all over the world, to do business in Hong Kong and thus with China.
Yes. If people remember, and before 1997, and Hong Kong was doing extremely well, and but due to no fault of the Chinese government or its policy, after 1997, particularly by 1998, there was a major Asian economic crisis. Okay.
This is right after the turnback.
That's correct. It was just a coincidence. It was not any doing by neither the Chinese government nor Hong Kong or Hong Kong government. And that caused a lot of problem. And because a lot of people misunderstood that because of the Chinese government and political influence or control over Hong Kong, that caused the economic downturn. But if we all examine this issue very carefully, the economic downturn did not just take place in Hong Kong, but the entire Asian region, okay? The Thai baht, okay, devaluated 1/3, and there was major problem at the time.
So interesting. This is all tripped off by things in the United States, but it had an almost immediate and direct and profound effect on Asia, especially Asia.
Yeah, and there was 1998. There was some, and a bit earlier, a bit earlier. But the more important thing, so to think about, and after the economic downturn in the 1998 and so forth, and the people in Hong Kong, of course, became discontent. And there were, I recall, quite a bit of demonstration in the streets, and for many different reasons or purposes. One of which, of course, was every year, and during this, a commemoration of the June 4th event that took place in 1989, and the Hong Kong people, by the thousand, they went to this public park and to demonstrate. And on the surface, it was a political demonstration. But I believe the Chinese government also saw that it's more of an economic issue than a political issue. Why I said that? Because essentially, if you look at the heart of the problem, because at that time, a lot of people did not get jobs. A lot of people did not have the money to support their family. When they have the time and they have nothing else to do, they would want to get out the steam by, and participating in demonstrations.
Yeah.
So was it more of a political issues or economic issues? All right. Now, in my
Probably
opinion,
a combination.
yes, it's a combination. But I think the Chinese did something not drastic, but produced very good result. It took less than a decade to prove that. And that is to open up the floodgate by allowing all these residents of major cities to enter into Hong Kong with much less requirements. They did not have to line up to apply for, and this so-called exit permit from China. So literally overnight, okay, wealthy tourists, okay, by the thousands, okay, entered Hong Kong. What happened then, okay, was so-called history. You now see, okay, the wealthy Chinese from mainland China line up literally outside of all this, and brand name product stores. And if you look back again, and China played the right card, okay, by allowing, and the wealthy, citizen to visit Hong Kong, and now Hong Kong, you see the demonstration has subsided. Yes, there's still demonstration, but far much, in smaller scale than before. When people they're busy making money, okay, and
They don't have time to
they
demonstrate.
have no time. they gotta make their money. They got to and do their work.
Yeah. So when you say they could come down without a lot of fanfare or bureaucracy, could they come down to live in Hong Kong or just to visit?
They could only go to Hong Kong to visit, and in order for anyone to live in Hong Kong, and they have to go through the Hong Kong immigration and requirements. So much similar to that of the United
So
States.
that didn't change.
That did not change.
Yeah. Yeah.
That did not change.
I remember, being in China proper and meeting a lot of Hong Kong businessmen who preferred to have their offices in Hong Kong, but they loved investing in China. And they found funding from all over the world and packaged that funding for investment in China. And that was to them the best possible arrangement. How do you feel about that? Is that the best possible arrangement? Is that what Hong Kong is about?
At that time it was, and I'm not too sure today, and I could say the same. Essentially, because of the professional trainings of the Hong Kong people, and we have to think back that, and in those days, most of the Chinese and could not command English, and they did not have a very good established legal system, and people had very limited of contact with the outside world. For anyone to get into this huge but raw market, they need people, they understand the Chinese culture, and they can command the Chinese language, and yet they're well-trained professionals with the understanding of business concept and the law. And so the foreigners, and that is those outside Hong Kong, they need the Hong Kong people to help them to enter into the China market.
Right, connect up.
That's correct.
That's Alan Ma. He's an attorney here in Honolulu, but he practices in areas that facilitate investment, immigration, trade with China. And we're calling this show is China the New Model. Here on ThinkTech Asia in Review on a given Friday. We'll be right back after this break.
We want to thank our underwriters.
Hawaiian Electric Company and its affiliates Maui Electric on Maui and Hawaii Electric Light Company on Hawaii Island are deeply committed to the communities they serve.
Galen Ho is a senior executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company.
The High-Tech Development Corporation, the state's leading technology agency, attached to the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism.
Castle and Cook Hawaii, with a time-honored legacy that spans more than 160 years and revolves around its mission of investing in Hawaii, creating communities, and providing for the needs of our state.
Hawaii Gas, formerly the Gas Company, a proponent of the Liquefied Natural Gas Initiative, helping Hawaii achieve its transition to clean energy and a better energy future.
Collateral Analytics, a Hawaii-based tech company empowering the real estate industry with greater and faster access to the tools and data they need to make better informed property investment decisions.
I'm Nicole Horry. Thanks so much for joining us on ThinkTech.
I'm Maria Kashem. See you next time.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here on Asia in Review with Alan Ma, an attorney at law here in Honolulu, talking about is China the new model? And one thing we talked about during the break was try to correct an implication I made in the first quarter of the show, the effect that the U.S. had some tripping effect on the 1998 meltdown in China and in Asia. That's not so. I was thinking 2008, but not 1998.
Not at that time.
Just 10 years off.
Okay.
Anyway, so the news a few weeks ago was that the China government had, advanced on yet another initiative to try to connect China with the world. Seems like they've done so many things. For example, they set up a CCTV all over the world, spent a lot of money, trying to build their brand on the television networks of the world. This is about 3-4 years ago. Mm-hmm. Very impressive how they decided to do that and did it. Just as Al Jazeera, could go and become part of the global networks on TV, so CCTV now. We don't see it so much here in this country, but in Europe, you can see that. You can see what's happening. So, the China government wants to expand its global horizons, wants to integrate its, its business enterprises in every continent, wants to have a global presence. And one of the things they did, apparently with this in mind, was to establish what amounts to a free trade zone in Shanghai, making Shanghai a kind of little Hong Kong. How's that doing? What does it mean, for the government, for China, for Hong Kong?
In 1980, and you talk about 30, 40 years ago now, and actually it's 1984 when I was still a law student. I was one of the very first to have visited Shenzhen. One of the four.
It's a manufacturing center just north of Hong Kong.
That's correct. Shenzhen is this, and city today. If you go to the new areas of Shenzhen, you would think that you were in Southern California. So beautifully, organized,
successful
master planned. Absolutely. I was one of the law students that have gone into Shenzhen to visit this special economic zone. We studied the policies of China to establish this so-called special economic zone. And the special economic zone serves two purposes. As much as it facilitates, the foreign companies to go in to do business a bit easier. It also served the purpose, okay, for the local folks in the region, okay, to be a bit easier to establish this operation to serve foreigners. Now, again, that was 35 years ago now, and not quite 40. And you look at the miracles this special economic zone did to all these different regions. And you must have visited this, like Shenzhen, and you could, and attest to the fact of the success. Here's an interesting thing, and after all these years of economic miracles that took place in China, and all of a sudden we see that, Shanghai and certain areas is being designated as a free trade zone. Shanghai is known to be the New York of America. It's
Sure.
a counterpart of New York of America. Why would why would the Shanghai need a free trade zone?
Good question.
Okay. Interesting, I talked to a couple of friends of mine just recently, and then their reaction was, this is more political than economics. This is almost like a warning shot to Hong Kong. Okay? This is like, and Hong Kong is already doing so good. And no longer today, the Chinese people in China would be less educated in language, in their dealings with foreign entities, and their legal system is much better established today. The question then is, would China think that it still needs Hong Kong? Okay, then why would my friends say that this is more like a warning to Hong Kong? Because Hong Kong is under the one country, two systems. Hong Kong people are still so free to demonstrate, okay? And they still do, and very frequently, although in much smaller scale, now that people got foods on the table as compared to the time in 1998. But still, China wants to make sure that, as the window to show to the world, okay, Hong Kong still could be better controlled. The way to tell Hong Kong people, be nice, be quiet, to cooperate, or else. Okay, my Hong Kong friends, okay, feel that way. As a matter of fact, that something quietly taking place is actually more than Shanghai is being, being designated to have a free trade zone. There's another area in Guangdong province is also quietly being designated as a free trade zone. To the Hong Kong people, how do they feel? Certainly it's a threat. It's a threat, okay? Because they feel that with this free trade zone, a lot of foreign entities could now go direct, okay, into China, bypassing Hong Kong. So making Hong Kong's position, okay, as the intermediaries to, okay, and bridge the transaction with the outside world and China, and Hong Kong's significance in taking that role is less and less. So to my friends, they call this the warning shots. Okay.
Now, one of the things that came up in our conversation at that dinner was the fact that the Chinese government was initiating all kinds of rules for this free trade zone, and the rules were pretty tough. And so this is like a way of moderating the amount of free trade that goes on in the free trade zone. If you make the rules tough, not that much can happen. If you ease them up, like easing the Federal Reserve rate, if you ease them up, different things happen. So you can have an effect on exactly how effective it is. So following on that very thought about, how it is a warning shot, all this, seems to me that if the Chinese government sort of sets it up and dampens it with, rules and controls, then it remains a threat until they decide they want to open it up. And if they open it up, then it's much more a threat. So this is something that's not static. This is dynamic. I think they set it up that way.
Absolutely. This is also how the Hong Kong people feel as well. And a lot of retail merchants in Hong Kong, they felt that if the demonstrations in Hong Kong, the political demonstration continue to be so frequent and intense, China could play the game by they opened up the floodgate, allowing the wealthy Chinese to go to Hong Kong to do all the shopping and making the investment. literally overnight, China can say no one can go. Okay, Hong Kong would go back to the 1998 era. So this is like political games played by China, and by using economics, okay, to control people, and that's how the game is played, and this is how the Hong Kong people deeply feel about their predicament.
Well, in 1998, just an observation, in 1998, there was a huge difference between the Western world and Hong Kong, essentially as a member of the Western world, and China, which at the time, was not nearly as capitalistic as it is today. Now, things are different. Now China is a Western nation in terms of its economy and its capitalistic, approach to things. So the difference between, Hong Kong and China is less of a difference in that context. And so you wonder, and I put this to you, you wonder in the long term whether China thinks that it will still need Hong Kong to be the intermediary, to be the interface between the Western capitalism and its own economy. And you wonder whether in the long term the plan would be, forget about Hong Kong. And I guess, well, what do you think about that?
Practically speaking, I think in the mind of the Chinese government, Hong Kong is not a necessary spot, and for the foreigners to continue to use it as a stepping stone to get into China. With that said though, however, and China is also very mindful that under the one country, two systems, and China still want to maintain Hong Kong as a place that's prospered, and is still very free. Why? China wants to impress the Taiwanese that this one country, two system works, so then the next item on the agenda would be one country, three system. If you cannot show to the satisfaction of the Taiwanese people that the system actually works, the Taiwanese people say, no, we're not going to be willing.
They would resist.
To revert back to China peacefully.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is more than just say, okay, we need it or we don't need it. Practically speaking, I think the Chinese government doesn't think that Hong Kong will play the same role as it did, but they still want to maintain it to show to Taiwan. That's how a lot of people in the region believes.
Oh, that is so interesting. So it's like so many things that are from China. It's a long plan. We're not talking about plans this year or this election cycle. We're talking about a 50-year plan.
Well, this is a very interesting comment because I had the opportunity to travel with the chairman of the fourth largest steel mills of China. So we went to Brazil and together to have, to engage in various very important business meetings. I was very puzzled, and China is one of the major, buyers of Brazilian and minerals. And, no doubt the Brazilian minerals is superior, and
steel, iron.
Absolutely,
yeah.
The iron ore, more specifically.
To make steel, yeah.
Absolutely. Then I said, if you look back, one of the reasons of and to have Japanese to have invaded China was because China's raw materials. Doesn't China have also iron ore, its own minerals and all that? China in fact controlled so-called rare earth to make all the major components in computers and all the electronic gadgets. So why would China, all these, and steel mills and all these steel manufacturing companies running around the world so busy buying up, all the minerals outside of China? And I wasn't really surprised, but when I heard that, it was so logical, and yet China has such a long term economic plans. When this chairman of this steel mill said that, he said, Mr. Ma, as much minerals as we have, we want to preserve it for the future generation to come. Let's use someone else's stuff first.
Oh, and the implication is we're going to use the iron ore from Brazil before we exhaust our own iron ore.
Absolutely. So in long run, in terms of competition, you want the money now, sell it. But if you have such a long-term plan as we do, like the Chinese things, then we keep ours for now. I was a little bit, as I said, I wasn't really surprised, but I was impressed actually by this sort of long-term plan.
Yeah, well, and then you see that. Forgive me one thought. You see that happening there, and then you switch your gaze to Washington, and in Washington today they're spending all their time on the filibuster rules and trying to change the system, totally political. And you remember an article, where was it? I think it was in the Times, but it was an article about how little legislation Congress has done this year because they've been so busy with silly things. And you compare that kind of policy making, that kind of long-term or short or non-planning, if I may, with what goes on in China. You say, gee, we're going further behind the curve because we don't engage. We here in this country do not engage in that kind of long-term consensus planning. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Let's take a break. That's Alan Ma, a lawyer here in Honolulu who specializes in dealing with investment, immigration, and trade with China. And our question today is China the new model, economically and otherwise? We're here on Asia in Review. I'm Jay Fidell. We'll be right back after this short break. Aloha, I'm Jay Fidell of ThinkTech. ThinkTech is a 501c3 Hawaii nonprofit corporation. We began ThinkTech in the year 2000. At ThinkTech, we work to raise public awareness about tech, energy diversification, and globalism in Hawaii. We do 20 live stream talk shows every business day, and we do a weekly TV show on OC16. We pay the bills with donations from our supporters. Won't you help us by making a donation? All you need to do is go to our website, thinktechhawaii.com, and click there on the donate button. We hope that you like what we do and that you will support us and help us continue to do it. Thanks so much for watching and for helping. I'm Jay Fidell of ThinkTech. Mahalo. We're back. We're live. We're here with Alan Ma, an attorney in town who specializes in matters with China, immigration matters, trade matters, investment matters. We're calling this is China the New Model here on Asia in Review on a given Friday, broadcasting from Pioneer Plaza in the core of downtown Honolulu. So, Alan, this is, the big part of our show. This is the title part of our show. What is the model these days in China? How is it changing? And are the changes for the better?
Okay. I think that the Chinese government, and by 1949, when, and the People's Republic became formally a country, it had a lot of issues, okay? One of the things that imposed that all the Westerners jumping up and down against was the one-child policy. And no doubt it was a violation of human rights. And no doubt, and people in an ancient country like China, where boys were children and would be their source of economic support. And there was no such thing called 401k. Your children's 401k. And the more children you have, the more 401k accounts that you have. That's the reality at that time. But on the other hand, the Chinese government also saw that the major economic burdens with a huge population that if the government could not support. So then the political issue and the economic issue will become intertwined, and then how does the government solve this issue? Solve the problem that is to have enough food for every citizen, okay, in this new country? Well, is to impose, okay, a very strict, okay, and system on each family will have only one child. Now, I am not a supporter of communism, but if you look at particularly after now, and over 40, 50 years, if you say that, was it a necessity to impose this sort of very strict system? I believe that now most people will tell you that yes. Otherwise, China would not be China today economically.
Because people were starving at the time?
Absolutely. There was a recent presentation in this very impressive presentation by this international economist, Ms. Moyo of Africa, and she had a book written as well as this talk in TED.com that I believe that everyone should and take a look at it. In her analysis, and she proclaims that the Chinese economic models today is the idol of all the emerging countries. That is, to have the economic rights first over political rights. If a person doesn't have food on the table, this is much secondary than the issue of not having the right to vote. Okay, and everyone needs to support the family and feed the children. And I think that China played the right card, despite the fact it was a violation to human rights and all these years. And but the system worked. The system worked because over 300 million of indigents and get out of their poverty. So that shows that how it works. But on the other hand, China is not setting up a system just to hurt its people, because as recent as only 2 weeks ago, what happened? The Chinese government now announced that if parents were products of one-child family policy, now they can have 2 children. They're liberalizing it.
Yeah,
Okay,
right now, yeah.
Absolutely.
So what does this mean? I mean, does it mean? I guess they're not saying they were wrong. They're saying times have changed.
Times have changed, and also there are many other sub-issues, such as because of the one-child policy, they're now having more boys than girls. A lot of guys cannot find wives, and they're creating other issues. They saw that coming. If you have a 2-child family policy, then people are willing to have 1 boy and 1 girl. And many stories about baby girls being drowned, being abandoned, and all that. There are a lot of tragedies.
Because the culture prefers male children.
Right. The boys are still more precious, and they're the one that more responsible too for the well-beings of their children.
Sure, they can be the 401k for their parents.
That's right, absolutely. So this is the reason why that, and you can see that the governments and political policy in the sense of, and limiting to have 1 child per family, and that's what really is the a step toward, moving for improving its economies. And on the other hand, this is nothing permanent. And when they saw that this having more guys now not being able to find, wives, then they changed the policy. So that the policy being changed for the good.
Okay. Is that okay? That's only one element, right, of the entire economic model. There's a lot more there.
Absolutely.
And you have similar other changes that are happening?
Well, the other thing was, which had already taken place was since about 6 years ago, if I remember correctly, that is to have the SOE to be privatized. Now, SOE is known to be state-owned enterprises. State-owned enterprises are those, today there are still many state-owned enterprises and to control major infrastructures and also public transportation system and so forth. SOE and state-owned enterprises are government-owned companies. And since about 6 years ago, and again I don't recall exactly, and the Chinese government started to privatize. Okay.
How do you do that?
Essentially, they allow people to buy into the stocks of the public companies. And some of those, and in fact, are doing very well. And this is another major steps toward, and allowing people to have, and their so-called private economic rights, okay? And while they still control the political rights in the sense that, it's not a pure, China is not a pure, okay, democracy.
But we're going to take one more break, and then we'll go in for the final quarter. Okay, Alan Ma, attorney at law here in Honolulu, we're talking about is China the new model, and we're getting right into that. What exactly do we have in the way of the model here in Asia in Review? I'm Jay Fidell. We'll be right back in a minute.
Aloha, I'm Nicole Horry for ThinkTech. For nearly half a century, the Hawaii Foreign Trade Zone No. 9 has brought the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone program to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. DBET, the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism, operates Hawaii's Foreign Trade Zone program to encourage international business and economic development. The Foreign Trade Zone's mission is to increase the amount of international trading activity in Hawaii, thereby providing employment opportunities for the residents of our island state. For more information, see ftz9.org. I'm Nicole Horry. Mahalo.
We're back. Welcome back to ThinkTech, Asia in Review. On a given Friday, we're here with Alan Ma, attorney at law, talking about China. Is it the new model? I guess that means the new model for the world, actually. This is important stuff. So, Alan, how is the model working? How is it changing? How is it a kind of thing that we want to emulate, maybe?
Again, then based on Mr. Moyo, this very prominent international economist analysis, the Chinese model would be such that, and allow people to have higher economic rights, to first take care of their personal financial needs, and to allow the people to first survive before they would allow these people to consider their political rights. Now, with that said, okay, and are we then saying that the Chinese would not have any political right? That's not true either. And one thing that as the world is really evolving with the internet, with the news, and with all the information now, the Chinese citizen could much easier, I wouldn't say completely have access to, but they now have easier access to all this information, particularly those of the outside world. And the people's perspective, perception of their own government about their own lives are also changing. So the Chinese government, in my opinion, would have no choice, but also adopt changes along the way. For example, we talk about, and the two-child policy. Now we talk about, the privatization of the state-owned, enterprises. And I believe there will be more changes to take place, okay? And for example, it's inevitable that, sooner or later, okay, a lower, level of government would have more people's participation in terms of allowing to cast their vote, allowing to voice their concerns and opinion. But again, we have to look at, in this 50 years of, evolvement in the Chinese government, from a poor country that did not have food, for its people, to these days, and the Chinese people is known to be major shoppers of branding products around the world. And that's a major, may not be a good thing, but it's still a major achievement and by government to allow these people to have done so much. And so I think that, in the future, in the near future, the government continue to open its door. While 50 years ago, the people were simply too ignorant to participate in a democracy. When you allow people who are, I hate to say, not educated, to blindly do things, is not a good thing either. You need to have strict control on limiting in what they can do, what they wanted to do. Okay, if you allow everyone just to have as many children as he or she wants, and you have chaos in the country. So I would think that in longer run, more democracy would be on its way.
In China.
In China.
Well, the Chinese are good students of best practices elsewhere in the world. I mean, there's so many, you've seen so many lawyers and other professionals in China go for training, they go for master's degrees all over the world. And in fact, there's an industry all over the world to provide them with that training. It's big business. And they're out to learn what other countries are doing, what best practices are. Just a month ago, we had two Chinese lawyers here at this table. One was a law professor, the other was a manager of a very big, 3,000-man law firm. Yeah, that's big in any context. And they were here, why? They wanted to see a jury trial. I don't know if I told you about that. It was extraordinary. They had come over to see a jury trial because they thought it was important for them to know how that works, because they may want to bring that back to China. So, this is a moving target. This is a dynamic of huge import. The question then is whether, in a kind of cross-pollination approach to it, there are things in China that we here in Hawaii and also in the U.S. in general can learn from. You have any thoughts about that?
Again, if I recall, and from the presentation by this international economist, Ms. Moyo, at the minimum, if not learning from the Chinese, is to cooperate with them. Instead of, from the American perspective, just criticizing China that, and you're no good and you violate human rights by imposing the one-child policy and so forth. There are things that the American government, the American public could share and learn, and because the world is getting smaller, and exactly what can be shared, can be learned, I think that at the minimum, I believe personally that using economics, to work in political policy is such a vital consideration. And when we think too much on the individual political rights, and often overlook, the economic necessities of the residents or citizens of the country, then there will be an imbalance in the long run. So if anything that the U.S. can learn, in my humble opinion, is to work more on the economic consideration in its political policies.
Yeah. Somehow that's an issue that we're going to see, raised more as food gets into shortage, water gets into shortage, fuel gets into shortage, energy in general. So those contentions, those frictions will certainly be at play. But now, speaking from your professional point of view here in Hawaii, what is your advice to the business community here? What is going on with China? Are they here buying up Kapiolani Boulevard? Are they taking a lot of what are those EB-5 immigration permits? Are they establishing businesses, doing trade? Are Americans that going to China and buying chateaus on the river? What's happening?
It's so sad to report that, statistically, and there have been $68 billion by Chinese companies to have invested in the U.S. last year alone. State of Hawaii, I know of nothing. And also, according to this article in the Hawaii Business Magazines, and title guarantee and analysis data, as big as the investment we thought the Chinese had made in Hawaii's real estate, Hawaii is third, far behind the Canadian and the Japanese. So there are more Chinese coming, but still not quite as many as we believe.
As tourists, you mean?
That's correct. Now, I just wanted to move very quickly, in my opinion, that most of the people missed a lot of things of why all these Chinese, they fly literally above our heads. Let's go to the mainland states. In my opinion, there are four components, like four wheels to move a car. Any one of these wheels doesn't move, the car will not go forward. The first, the most important, it doesn't move, in my opinion, at all, is our government, the state government. The second one, it moves a little bit, but not as much, would be business communities, like the trade association, the business organization. I'm talking about and like the Chamber of Commerce and all those. The third, only the individual businesses, and the business people. The fourth would be our citizens, with open mind. Now, I always talk about the government as a major component or the major wheel to move this vehicle forward in order to attract the Chinese to come in. Chinese believed in authorities. I recall, as a trade representative of Hawaii, I went with the then Governor Cayetano in all these trade missions. We have attracted so much more attention okay, and for the Taiwanese and the Koreans and so forth to look at, okay, Hawaii today, far less. Why? Because you don't see any activities done by the state of Hawaii, the government, all right? And at one time I was trying to write an article, so-called using Sun Tzu's, okay, and
What is Sun Tzu?
Art of War. It was
The Art of War, yes.
Right. And one thing is that we need to understand why other states are doing better than Hawaii. And just for my own curiosity, I click on this state of California's government website. I look at the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. Right on top, they have China. You click China, 10 million things pop up. Of course, I exaggerate on what California has done. You look further, then there is another icon. If you want it into Chinese, the whole website will be translated into Chinese. Okay, once you get into that, the China icon, you go further down, you see EB5 describing what EB5
Exactly
is
how
about.
you do it. Yeah.
Right. EB5 is the program that where people would invest a certain amount and create jobs in order to get a green card. Hawaii were far behind. While in the 90s, we were the front runners. I can attest to that as I was running an office on behalf of the state of Hawaii to attract investors. Today, we have nothing like that.
This is a problem. Alan, we have to continue the conversation because we're out of time. But it's very troubling, and it means that Hawaii has to do something, and I hear your advice. Your advice is we have to get sharp on this. We have to do
Absolutely.
something about this. Alan Ma, attorney at law, talking about is China the new model, but also is Hawaii responding appropriately to what China is. Here on Asia in Review, thanks for watching. We'll be back in a few minutes with more. Aloha.